All right, so I want to show you this video. It's one of the example problems from Acellus. So how would you solve it? So the problem is 2.8, right, 2 and 8 tenths plus 2x divided by 8 equals 6 tenths or 0.6. Of course, we're trying to isolate or solve for x. So the overall concept that they're trying to teach here, which is really fundamental to math and algebra, is basically undoing all the other junk that's around the x, right? That's what we have to do to isolate. So here for step one. So step one, right? The easiest thing to do to get rid of all the junk that's with x. So if you divide by 8, if you multiply the top by 8, this becomes an equivalent of 1. And an equivalent of 1, basically in math, just doesn't mean anything, right? It goes away. And then I take 6 tenths times 8. 6 times 8 is 48. Right? Put my decimal place back in there. And so now, okay, for step one, I've done some isolation here, and I see that 2.8 plus 2x equals 4 and 8 tenths, or 4.8. So now I'm going to move on to my next step. 2.8 plus 2x equals 4.8. So I'm looking at trying to get this x still by itself. Now, I could divide by 2 if I wanted, because this is 2 times x. So you do the opposite to isolate, right? Make an equivalent of 1. In this case, though, I have this number hanging out here. I'm going to subtract it because 2.8 minus 2.8 is 0. And of course, I don't have to write that anymore. So now I just have 2x equals, so 4.8 minus 2.8, well, that's easy. That's 2, right? This is 2 times x. The opposite to isolate is 2 divided by, or divide by 2, right? That makes an equivalent of 1. And I do the same to the opposite side of the equation. And so in this case, x equals 1, right? That's all it is. Now, if I go back and put this into the original, oh, there we go. So I put it into the original, right? This would essentially come out to 4.8 divided by 8 is 0.6, which, is correct. But that's what they're trying to do here, is to isolate. So another example problem that they're giving you here, which I'm going to take a look at, is, all right, so now we have 8.7 plus x divided by 1.1 equals 7. Okay, so the whole concept here, again, is to isolate x, to get x by itself. And it looks like these problems are fairly similar. And then the examples I've seen, the first step is to always get rid of this fraction, right? Because fractions, nobody likes working with fractions. So the opposite of dividing by 1.1 is multiplying this entire thing by 1.1. And 1.1 over 1.1 is not actually allowed in math, but we don't care. Right? You can't have a decimal over a decimal in a fraction, but we don't care because it makes 1. Now I'm going to multiply the opposite side of the equation, because anytime I do something to isolate over here, I have to repeat the procedure on this side. Okay, so 7 times 1.1, and then that's going to leave me with 8.7 plus x equals, well, you could use a calculator for this if you wanted. It is 7.7, right? And now to get x by itself, I'm going to subtract, because the opposite of adding to this, right, is subtracting, which gives me 0. And I have to do the same to the opposite side. Okay, that is negative 1. And so I have x equals negative 1.0. So the concept they're trying to teach you here is just to isolate the x, and you basically go through steps of undoing, right? So the next one that I will look at here, let me turn the page. The next one that I'll take a look at, do one more example problem here. So it looks challenging, right? But if you just kind of break it down to the basic level of what are we trying to accomplish here. Right? They're throwing decimals and what looks like a fraction and all kinds of awful things in here. But it's pretty straightforward when you think about, okay, what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get x by itself, right? In an equation sign, it's a balance point. So whatever I do to this side, I must repeat and do to this side. So if you looked at this, what is the easiest thing that you could do to start eliminating, right? Well, adding the 8.6, that doesn't really seem to be fantastic, right? Now, 2 over 2 looks like an equivalent of 1, but we have to actually multiply, and I need to be more clear. We would technically have to multiply the whole top, right? So that's the easiest step. 2 over 2 is an equivalent of 1, right? Which in a fraction we don't need to write. And then I multiply this side by 2. Now that keeps things balanced. So 2x minus 8.6 equals negative 2.3 times 2. Negative times a positive is still a negative. Negative 4.6. Right? So now I have 2x minus 8.6 equals negative 4.6. So if you looked at this side, okay, what does it seem like is the easiest thing to do to isolate over here? Okay, now I could divide this whole thing by 2, but then I'm back to the beginning, right? But if I added 8.6, that's pretty easy, right? That's 0. And I have to do the same to this side. Now you get a little complicated here because you're adding a positive and a negative. And so as long as you understand the concept, get a calculator, right? If you need to. So positive 8, negative 4.6, if you go through and look at those together, what you're going to find out is that it's actually positive 4. Right? Because it's like you had $8.60, you spent $4.60, you have $4. Okay, and this is 2x equals 4. Now the last step, this is really 2 times x. Divide by 2. Divide by 2. Well, x equals 4 halves, but of course we don't say 4 halves, right? 4 divided by 2, x equals, right, we don't say 4 halves, we say x equals 2. So hopefully that's helpful. I saw there's some other stuff on YouTube and Khan Academy, but basically the concept there is just to try to work through it in a way that you are undoing whatever is with x. Right? So if we go through and looked at any other problem, the procedures are going to remain the same. So going back over this one, or I'll write a new example and we'll just kind of talk it through. So, right, 0.2x plus 1 over 7 equals 0.4. So if you look at this, what's the first thing that's going to be easiest to get x by itself, right? We're trying to isolate this. Make that equivalent of 1. Multiply by 7. Right? Or whoops. That's going to give me 2.8. Right? Subtract the 1. So now I have, it's like $2.80 minus $1. You have $1.80. Okay, this is gone, right? Because that's 0. So I'm going to divide by 0.2. Divide by 0.2. And x equals, okay, and now all you have to do is solve for that problem. What is 1.8 divided by 2? And if you had to, this is where you could get a calculator, right? And trying to do it in my head, I think you multiply by 5, so it's going to be, I don't know. I'd have to get a calculator, go through and do that one. Make sure I'm doing it correct, or you could do it the long way. by hand if you wanted. Whoops, no, I multiplied. See, even I make mistakes here. So in this case, it's actually division. I think you're multiplying it by 5 to get the reciprocal. But that's how to solve it. So hopefully that's helpful. Just let me know if it's still not quite making sense, because you're getting into some good pre-algebra here, which is not simple, but it's awesome because once you understand these concepts, you won't have really a whole ton of challenges in math. So keep up the good work.